A sniper with 12 years of training behind him wakes up in the body of an emaciated peasant. The village is freezing. The barn is empty. His wife looks at him without hope, out of sheer habit. And the only thing he has is an eye that remembers ballistics, and a body that will give out on the third shot. The cold wakes him before he can think. A drop of melted snow hits his eyebrow. Rian opens his eyes and doesn't recognize the ceiling. He doesn't recognize the walls. He raises his hand and his fingers won't obey. Thin, like dry twigs. His ribs stick out so much you can count each one. This isn't his body. He realizes it immediately. But the pain is real, and that's what's truly. Memory hits him in two waves. The first like a bucket of ice water. The highway. Night. The headlights of a truck in his face. A swerve to the right to save his sister in the passenger seat. A crash into the driver's door. His sister has to survive. He doesn't. And he didn't. The second wave flips through someone else's photo album right inside his skull. The village of Pyeongchon, 40 households on a frozen river. The northern edge of the kingdom of Haedong, the third year of the long famine. The grain has rotted on the stalk. The game has retreated deep into the forest, where the twisted creatures of the fallen shaman roam. Ordinary spears won't harm them. Hunters leave and never return. But the Sun household is raising taxes. And this is where the countdown begins. 28 days until the tax collector arrives. If they don't pay, Pyeongchon will be wiped out. Their land will be taken. The people will be driven away. His name is Rian, 23 years old. At 7, he fell through the ice. Half his face froze. He started stuttering. The village labeled him a fool. He accepted that role. It's safer that way. His wife sleeps beside him. Han Sol, 21 years old, an orphan with dowry. They married her off to the fool because there was nowhere else to put her. She breathes in fits and starts and presses her forehead against his shoulder in her sleep. That's how people cling to the last warm spot when there's no other left. On the stove sleeps his cousin, Yoon Mina, 14 years old. She clutches a rag doll to her chest. Her knees are pulled up to her chin. In the corner, Aunt Park Rana snores, 38 years old, a widow. The only one with enough strength left to snore. She fed them all, or rather, she tried to. There was nothing to feed them. 4 people, 1 room, a hole in the roof, an empty barn. Rian sits down. His head is spinning. His stomach is empty, and this emptiness makes him queasy. And then his gaze catches the wall. A crossbow hangs on the wall. An old one. The stock is cracked lengthwise. The bowstring is made of gut. The wooden shoulders are weak. There are 3 bolts beneath it. Only 3. The shafts are crooked. The tips are blunt. He removes one and twirls it between his fingers. The shaft points to the left. Half a palm's width at 20 paces. So he needs to adjust. The second bolt is slightly better. The third is the straightest. He must save it for the crucial shot. And right then, 2 memories converge in his mind. One knows that the hare returns to its lair in 6 to 8 hours. That the self-tightening snare is set on the trail, a palm's width from the ground. That the hazel grouse sits in the snow until the very last moment and takes flight only 3 paces away. The other knows that a shot at 80 paces, with a crosswind, drifts a fist's width. That the humidity correction for wet snow increases the drift by 1/3. That composite limbs shoot 3 times farther than wooden ones. 12 years at the range. Thousands of shots. Ren knew everything there was to know about crossbows in the world from which his soul came. But his body is failing him. The tendons in his left arm tremble from the mere effort. His collarbone healed crooked after that ice. He'll be able to draw the crossbow twice. On the third pull, his arm will give out. So he can't fire in bursts. One shot, one target. A long pause. Then another. A sniper, not a fighter. He gets dressed. Patchwork pants, a sheepskin coat from someone else's shoulder. His boots are leaking. He tucks a coil of rope into his belt, enough for 6 nooses. He slings the crossbow over his shoulder. He takes 3 bolts. He walks toward the door. Khan's soul wakes up at the creek. She looks at him. She is silent. There is no hope in her eyes. Only the habit of watching her husband do something pointless. He wants to say he'll be back with food, that everything will be fine. He says nothing. He goes out. Snow up to his ankles. The first real snow of this fall. There's no wind. That's good. Without wind, the bolt flies where you aim. Of 40 courtyards, fewer than 20 have smoke rising from them. The rest stand with their shutters boarded up. Some have gone to their relatives. Some have left for good. He passes the yard of the village elder, Kim Dogon. A sturdy fence, thick smoke from the chimney. The elder always has something to burn and something to eat. Beyond the barren field, the forest begins. Stubble pokes out from under the snow like black sticks. And here, all the hunters insist in unison that the beast has gone. No tracks, as if everything has died out. Rian crouches at the edge of the woods. He looks at the snow, and he sees what the villagers do not see, or cannot see. A hare's track. 8 o'clock. The little creature walked calmly from the river. It wasn't running, so there are no predators nearby. Here's a fox's track. Fresh. The fox followed the hare's trail but didn't catch up. It turned toward the ravine. So that's where its den is. He follows the hare's trail. He finds a resting place under an uprooted spruce. The snow is trampled. Pea-sized droppings. A hare always returns. In 6 to 8 hours. Rian cuts the rope into pieces by hand. He ties self-tightening loops. The hare sticks its head in, and the loop tightens from its own jerk. He sets 3 around the resting spot, 20 paces apart. He camouflages them with twigs. He finds a second resting spot. He sets up 3 more. Then he goes deeper to look for the bird. In the cold, the hazel grouse sits motionless on the lower branches, conserving heat. If you don't know where to look, you'll walk right past it and not notice. He spots it. 80 paces. An old birch tree. The hazel grouse has hunched over. Its head is tucked into its shoulders. Rian raises his crossbow. He loads the 3rd bolt, the smoothest one. His left hand trembles. His collarbone aches. He exhales, closes his eyes for a second, opens them. No wind, high humidity, minimal drift. The bolt will veer half a palm's width to the left. Adjustment slightly to the right of center. Aim for the head, for the eye. Then the carcass is intact and the hide is intact. At the range, he hit the bullseye from 120 meters 8 times out of 10. But that was a different body, strong, trained. Now his hands are like sticks. Only his eye remembers. His finger remembers. Physics is the same from one world to the next. He pulls the trigger. A click. The hazel grouse twitches and falls. The bullet entered just below the eye. The stock wobbled on the follow-through. It's cracked, needs fixing. But the hazel grouse is dead, clean. He moves on. Finds a fox den, memorizes it. Finds a boar trail, a week old, a boar weighing 600 or 700 pounds. Alone. Headed for a watering hole by the river. Memorizes it. And then he stumbles upon a lair that stops him in his tracks. Too big. Too deep. The snow at the edges isn't fresh, but crushed, as if a 30-pound body had been lying there. And a heavy, sour smell wafts from the lair. Not animal. Tracks lead from it into the thicket toward the forbidden. 5-toed, with claws a finger's length long. A nocturnal beast. Rian takes note of that, too. But he doesn't get close. Not with this crossbow. Not with this body. By evening, he checks the snares. 2 hares are still alive. He finishes them both off with a blow to the back of the head. In the other snares, there's another hare and a fox that came upon it and got tangled up. He finishes off the fox with a stone to the base of its skull. The pelt is intact. 3 hares, a fox, a hazel grouse. He used one of his 3 bolts, and that one came back. He heads toward the village and does the math. The hazel grouse is 1.5 pounds. The 3 hares are 9. The fox isn't good for meat, but the pelt is worth 2 sacks of millet. That'll be enough for 4 people for a week. But he needs more. He needs a boar. 40 pounds of meat from the carcass. So tomorrow he'll be back. Every day. 27 days left. He pushes open the door and dumps his catch on the table. 3 pairs of eyes turn toward him. Aunt Rana opens her mouth. Closes it. Yunmina drops her doll and doesn't blink. Han Sol slowly stands up. She touches the hair. It's warm. She looks at her husband and quietly asks how he knows that. Before, he would have hesitated and started stuttering. But the past ended this morning. He answers without a single hesitation. He says that after that ice, his head finally fell into place. She doesn't believe him. He can see it in her eyes. But she doesn't ask any further. She goes to put the pot on the stove. That evening, they eat a hot meal for the first time in 12 days. Aunt Rana butchers a hare with trembling hands. Rian stretches the fox pelt on a frame to dry. His body begs to be stuffed and to swallow. But he eats slowly. After such a long fast, it can't be any other way. He finishes his meal. He gets up. He takes the crossbow. He sits down by the candle, and he begins to repair the stock. He pulls the crack tight with a wet rawhide strap. It will dry and hold fast. He sharpens the tips on a river stone until they're razor sharp. He straightens the crooked feathers over the steam from the kettle. By midnight, the crossbow shoots straighter. 3 bolts have become 3 true shots. He falls asleep, thinking of the boar's trail. At dawn, he sets out again, this time farther, toward the river. The boar goes to the same patch of wormwood every 3rd day at sunset. Today is the 3rd. Rian reads the trail like a page. Here is where the beast dug in the snow. Here is where it rubbed its tusks against the trunk. Here is its lair in the spruce grove on the leeward side. It isn't going to its lair. It's going to the watering hole and waiting. It chooses an oak on a hillock. The wind is blowing from the river toward him. That means the boar won't catch his scent. 60 paces to the sagebrush, close enough for a sure shot, far enough that the beast won't reach him if he misses. He crouches in a fork in the path and freezes. The cold bites through his sheepskin coat. His fingers are going numb. He warms the bowstring under his armpit so it won't stiffen. An hour. 2. The light fades behind the forest in a red streak. And then the underbrush cracks. The boar emerges at the waterhole, huge, black bristles glistening with frost, fangs as wide as 2 palms. It lowers its snout to the water. Rian holds his breath. The boar's hide on the nape is as thick as a finger. Wooden shoulders won't pierce it. You have to hit it in one spot, behind the ear, at the base of the skull where the bone is thin. Aim with a fist. 60 paces. There's no wind in the lowlands. He catches the moment when the beast freezes over the water. He exhales halfway. He holds. He draws the bowstring. The bolt flies without a whistle. It enters behind the ear, right into the fur. The boar tosses its head, takes 2 steps, and collapses into the snow by the wormwood. Doesn't twitch. Clean. Rian sits for another minute, not believing it. Then he slides down from the oak on wobbly legs. 40 pounds of meat. Maybe more. Fat, hide, bones for glue, intestines for a new bowstring. But the boar weighs 6 times as much as he does. He can't haul it away alone. He guts the animal on the spot with quick, precise movements. A fool's memory knows where to cut. He removes the hide. He divides the carcass into 4 parts. He loads it onto a homemade sled made of 2 poles and the hide. He drags the first part toward the village in the dark, following his own morning trail. He returns for the second. By midnight, he has hauled it all. His back is on fire. His left arm won't hold. But the meat is in the porch. And then a neighbor comes out at the noise. Old Chong. He looks at the butchered carcass, at the fool with bloodied hands. He is silent for a long time. Then he asks if Rian will sell him a leg for 2 sacks of barley. Rian nods. The first deal. By morning, a rumor is spreading through the village. The fool Cho has taken down a boar with his broken crossbow. The villagers don't believe it until they see the meat with their own eyes. By noon, a line has formed at his yard. Some bring millet, some bring salt, some bring copper coins stashed away for a rainy day. Rian trades silently and honestly. He doesn't jack up the price. He takes whatever they pay. He knows the rumor will reach the village head and the tax collector. He knows that too much attention is dangerous for someone they considered a fool. But there is no choice. 26 days remain. By evening on the 3rd day, Kim Dogon himself enters the courtyard, the village elder, fat where the whole village is thin, in a fox fur hat, 2 burly men behind him. He surveys the porch with the meat. He squints. He says softly that he's glad for his neighbor's good fortune, that the village needs a provider, and that according to the old agreement, any major catch in the communal forest is shared with the village head. Half. Rian looks up at him, plays the fool again, mumbles, drags out a pause while he counts in his head. The village head talks about an agreement. There is no such agreement. But behind his back are 2 fists, and the power to charge arrears to whomever he wants. Rian nods slowly. He gives up the smaller share. He pretends not to understand the difference. The village head is satisfied. He leaves with the meat and the thought that the fool has remained a fool. But Rian watches after him and takes it all in. The village head is greedy. The village head is cowardly as long as the power is on his side. And the village head will be the first to run to the tax collector to curry favor. That must be taken into account. In the evening, he sharpens the bolts again. There are now not 3 but 5 of them. boar bones went into the new arrowheads. The intestines are drying on the bowstring that will strike again. Khan's soul sits down beside him. He is silent for a long time. Then he says that during the day he heard the women whispering that the night beast was approaching the northern villages again, the one called the Deformed One. That in neighboring Kwani he snatched 2 sheep and a child in a single night. That spears are useless against him, and a raid by 10 men returned with 3 dead. Rian listens and remembers that carcass. 30 poods, claws in the finger, a sour smell. He realizes the beast is close, that sooner or later it will come to Pyeongchon, and that 10 men with spears against it means 10 corpses. But one man, with a steady eye and a narrow, piercing bolt aimed at the right spot under the shoulder blade, is a different story. He looks at his wife. For the first time, something else flashes in her eyes instead of her usual expression. Don't, just yet. But the question remains, who are you now? He doesn't answer. He takes the smoothest bolt, places it before him, and begins to think about how to kill what steel cannot pierce. 25 days remain, and the beast is already coming. That night, Rian didn't sleep. He sat by candlelight and worked on the crossbow. The stock was cracked lengthwise from the butt to the trigger mechanism. The crack wasn't deep, but with every shot it widened by a hair's breadth. 20 more shots and the stock would fall apart. In the old world, he would have filled the crack with epoxy and wrapped it in fiberglass. Here, there was neither. But there were tendons from a hare. Aunt Rana had set them aside when she butchered the carcass. Thin, whitish, stiff. If he soaked them in cold water and wrapped the stock while they were wet, the tendons would tighten as they dried and seal the crack. Not permanently. For 100 shots. That would be enough. He worked quietly. He cut the tendons into thin strips with a bone knife, soaked them in a bowl of water, wound them around the stock turn by turn, pulled them tight. His hands trembled with fatigue. His collarbone ached, but he didn't stop. By dawn, the stock was wrapped from the middle to the butt. The wet tendon glistened in the light of the dying candle. It would dry in a day. It would become as hard as stone. He set the crossbow on the bench and lay down. Han's soul lay next to him with her eyes open. She wasn't asleep. She was watching him. He felt her gaze, but said nothing. He closed his eyes. He fell asleep. He woke up 3 hours later. His body didn't want to get up. His muscles ached. His joints creaked. Hunger gnawed at him from within, but he got up. He finished yesterday's soup. Cold, tasteless. But calories are calories. He took a rope, a knife, bolts. He left the crossbow out to dry. He'd do without it today, just snares. He stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The frost had set in overnight. The snow crunched under his feet. His breath swirled in white vapor. He walked into the forest and thought. 3 hares and a hazel grouse isn't bad. But that's not a plan. That's luck multiplied by knowledge. He needs a plan. 27 days until the collector arrives. He needs to fill the granary. What does it mean to fill the granary? Meat, fur, something to trade. Meat is first and foremost big game. Boar, deer, maybe a roe deer if he's lucky. Small game too, but you can't fill your belly on that. For 4 people, we need at least 2 pounds of meat a day. That's 60 pounds a month. Plus a reserve. Plus the tribute. The tribute to the House of Sleep is calculated in pelts and grain. No grain, so pelts it is. A fox pelt is the most valuable, then a wolf pelt, then hair, but you need a lot of hairs. 10 hair pelts equal 1 fox pelt. The plan took shape in his head like a spreadsheet, columns and rows. How many days? How many snares per day? How many hairs per snare? How much time for big game? What traps to set? Where to set them? When to check them? 12 years on the training grounds taught him one thing. Hunting isn't about bravado. Hunting is about logistics. He spent the whole day in the forest, set 12 new snares, cut hemp rope enough for 8, made 4 more from thin willow twigs, rougher, but they work. Checked yesterday's snares. 2 hares, one alive, the other dead. Froze overnight. He had to retrieve the carcass now. If it lay there another day, a fox would find it and drag it away. He took both. Then he walked to the ravine where he'd seen a fox den yesterday. He sat down 30 paces away. He waited an hour. The fox didn't come out. Another hour. The den seemed empty, but he saw fresh droppings at the entrance. So the fox is here, just being cautious. He left. There's no point in shooting without a crossbow for now, but he remembered the spot. Instead of a fox, he found something else. A boar's track. Fresh. From today. A large beast was heading toward the river. The same boar as yesterday. You can tell from the tracks. Same depth, same stride. The right hind leg drags slightly. An old injury. The beast is limping, but alive. 800 pounds of live weight. Maybe more. You can't take one like that with a single bolt. I need a pit trap. Rian followed the boar's tracks to the spot where it turned toward the river. A narrow passage between 2 large fir trees. The boar passed through here regularly. The snow is trampled down. A trail. The perfect spot for a pit. But digging the pit will take 2 days. Alone. No shovel. So I had to make one. Out of what? Out of wood. I had to go back for a tool. He returned to the village by evening. 2 hares. Not much, but the snares had worked. Tomorrow there would be more. He tossed the hares onto the table. Aunt Rana was already waiting. Today she didn't cry. She skinned them silently and quickly. She moved like a person who had a task to do. Sol sat by the window and examined the fox pelt. The pelt was drying by the stove and had already begun to harden. Rian approached. He looked. He shook his head. He said it couldn't be done that way. He said the pelt would be brittle and stiff. It needed to be tanned. With brains. Sol looked at him blankly. Rian explained. Every animal has enough brains in its head to tan its own pelt. That's how nature works. You have to take out the brains, mash them into a paste, mix them with warm water, and rub it into the pelt. For a long time. Several hours. Then the hide would become soft, supple. It wouldn't rot. It would last for years. Sol listened. For the first time in 2 days, there was something on her face other than quiet disbelief. Interest. She asked how he knew that. Rian answered the same way he had yesterday. Her head snapped back into place. Sol was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Show me." She didn't ask. She said. He nodded. The next morning they worked together. Rian demonstrated. Sol repeated. The brain from yesterday's hair, slippery, gray. Sol didn't flinch. She kneaded it in a wooden bowl, mixed it with water. She began rubbing it into the fox pelt. Her movements were careful, precise. Her hands were small but strong. She worked quietly and with concentration. Rian watched her hands and thought she would make a good tanner, maybe the best in the village. On the third day, the crossbow was dry. The sinew wrapping had tightened and become hard. The stock no longer wobbled. He pulled the string taut, checked the action. The trigger pull was a bit stiff. No big deal. He'd get used to it. He stepped outside. He hung a fist-sized piece of bark on the fence. He backed up 40 paces. He loaded the bolt. He took aim. He fired. The bolt hit the center of the bark. At 40 paces. Good. He stepped back 60 paces. He fired. The bolt landed 2 fingers above the center. My shoulders are weak. At 60 paces, the bolt is already curving. I need to make an adjustment. I stepped back 80 paces. I fired. The bolt hit the lower edge of the bark, right on the edge. 80 paces is the limit for this crossbow. You can't shoot any farther. Only closer. Yoon-mina was standing around the corner of the house, watching. He noticed her red head as he pulled the bolt out of the fence. The girl wasn't hiding. She was just standing there, watching. Her eyes were big, attentive. He walked over. He asked if she wanted to learn. She didn't answer. She shrugged. In the language of 14-year-olds, that meant yes. He showed her how to hold the crossbow. It was heavy for her. Her arms were thin. She couldn't hold it. But she could use a support. Rest the stock on the fence. Press it against her shoulder. Right eye open, left eye closed. Look along the bolt, not at the target, at the tip of the bolt. The target should blur and the tip should be sharp. Mina listened. She nodded. She took the crossbow, leaned it against the fence, pressed it against her shoulder. Her hands were shaking. She took aim. He adjusted her elbow, 2 fingers lower. She fired. The bolt went 3 handbreadths to the right of the bark. Missed. She frowned. He said that was normal. Said the first 100 shots all miss. Then you start hitting the mark. She looked at him from under her brows and asked if she had to do all 100 today. He almost smiled. Said no, 10 a day. There aren't many bolts. We have to save them. On the 4th day, he went to dig a hole. He found an old wooden shovel in the shed behind the house. It was crooked, with a cracked handle. He wrapped the handle the same way. Tendon and water. While it was drying, he carved a new shovel head out of a birch trunk. Sturdy. Wide. Not made of iron, but it'll handle the dirt. He came to a wild boar trail, between 2 fir trees. He started digging. The ground was frozen. The first few inches were as hard as stone. Deeper down it was slightly softer. But digging frozen ground with a wooden shovel is a job for the damned. An hour later he had removed a layer as thick as his palm. His hands were burning. Blisters had formed and burst. His collarbone screamed with pain. He sat down to catch his breath. He looked at his hands. Blood on his palms mixed with the dirt. The beautiful hands of a shooting instructor. Palms that had known only the handle of a crossbow and a computer mouse. Now these palms were foreign, thin, weak, with calluses unaccustomed to a shovel. He wrapped his hands in rags. He continued. By evening, the pit was knee-deep. Not enough. It needed to be chest-deep. A boar in a knee-deep pit would turn around and walk away. But a boar in a chest-deep pit would get stuck, especially if there were stakes at the bottom. The next day he came back, and the next, and the next. He dug for 4 days. He left in the morning. He'd return in the evening. Between digging, he'd check the snares, 2 or 3 hares every day. One day, nothing. Another day, 4. He carried the hides home, salted them, took the meat to his aunt, salted the wound. The system was coming together. On the 6th day, the pit was ready. Chest deep for an adult. The bottom was studded with stakes made from sharpened alder trunks, covered with branches on top and sprinkled with snow. From a distance, it was indistinguishable from flat ground. A boar trail ran right across the cover. The beast will pass through here. The only question is when. Rian returned to the village and, for the first time in 6 days, faced a problem that couldn't be solved with traps. Standing by the well was the village elder, Kim Dogon, a burly 50-year-old man with a red face and small eyes. Next to him was the headhunter, Lee Jun-ho, lean and sinewy, a beard down to his waist, 40 years in the forest, the village's best hunter, or rather, the former best. For the past 2 years, he had returned empty-handed like everyone else. Kim Dogon blocked his path. He said he wanted to talk. The elder's voice was heavy, overbearing, accustomed to giving orders. He said rumors had reached him that Cho Rian goes into the forest alone, without permission, without paying the hunting share, that everyone who takes game from the forest must give 1/3 to the elders. Such is the law. Such is the custom. Rian stood and listened, the crossbow on his back, 2 hare carcasses in his hands. Lee Jun-ho looked at the hares. There was something in his eyes besides anger. Envy. Rian saw it clearly. The man who had fed the village for 40 years and hadn't been able to bring back a single hare for the past 2 years, stood there, watching as a simple-minded fool hauled game every day. Rian answered calmly, without stuttering. They both noticed that, too. He said he was ready to pay the hunter's share. He said he would bring 1/3 of the catch to the elders. But he asked for one thing in return. He asked for permission to hunt large game. A boar. Kim Dogon narrowed his eyes. A boar? Where have you seen a boar, boy? All the boars are gone. Rian replied that he had found a trail, a fresh one, a large beast, and that he had set a pit. Lee Jun-ho flinched. A pit? What kind of pit? Where? Rian explained. Between 2 fir trees on the boar trail leading to the river, chest deep, with stakes. Lee Jun-ho looked at him for a long time. Then he said he knew that spot, that he'd walked past those fir trees for 20 years, that he'd never seen a boar's track there. Rian replied that the tracks were fresh, after the first. The beast came from the south, possibly from across the river. The foreman was silent. He didn't believe it, but he couldn't say the young man was lying, because the young man had hares in his hands. Every day. Kim Dogon thought for a moment and said that if they caught a boar, half the carcass would belong to the community. Not 1/3, half. Rian nodded. Half it is, then. A boar weighs 8 poods. 4 poods of meat would be enough for him. Deal. He gave 1 hare to the village elder. He went home. Sol was waiting at home. She was already used to waiting, but now she waited differently. Before, she waited with empty hands and empty eyes. Now, with a knife and a bowl, ready to work. He gave her the hare. She began to skin it. Her movements had grown more confident over these days. The knife moved smoothly. She removed the hide in one piece. She didn't tear it. He had shown her how on the second day. a cut from the throat to the tail, then along the insides of the legs. Then you pull the hide with both hands, slowly. If you tear it, there will be holes. Holes cut the price in half. Sol got it the first time. Her hands were small but precise, like a surgeon's. He watched her work and thought that in a month she'd be skinning better than any hunter in the village. On the 7th day, he checked the pit. Empty. 4 tracks led to the pit but turned back 10 paces away. The beast had sensed something, maybe a human scent, maybe something unnatural. Rian crouched over the tracks. He thought. Boars are smart, smarter than most people think. They have a nose like a dog. They can smell a human from 100 paces away. So he had to get rid of the scent. How? With fir branches. Rub the edges of the pit and the lid with fir needles. The fir scent would mask the human one. And one more thing. Bait. Boars love acorns. Acorns? There aren't any. But wild boars also love mushrooms. Dried mushrooms. Aunt Rana had some dried mushrooms. A handful. The last ones. He returned home. He asked for the mushrooms. His aunt looked at him as if he'd asked her to give him her last shirt, because that's exactly what it was. He explained, "The mushrooms are for the boar." A boar means meat for a month. She gave them to him, silently. On the 8th day, he rubbed the pit with pine needles. He scattered the mushrooms along the trail, leading to the pit, and left. He would check tomorrow. He wasn't hoping. He was calculating. The boar goes to the river once every 2 or 3 days. It can smell the mushrooms from 200 paces away. It will follow the scent. Its nose will lead it to the pit. 50-50 odds. But if not tomorrow, then in 2 days. Or in 3. The beast will come. On the 9th day, Rian came to the pit and saw that the cover was gone. The branches had collapsed inward. The ground around it was torn up. A heavy wheezing sound came from the pit. He approached cautiously. He peered inside. The boar was lying on its side. 2 stakes had pierced its belly. A third was in its hind leg. The beast was alive. Its eyes were wild, red, foam on its fangs. It tried to stand, but couldn't. 800 pounds, maybe more. Huge, black bristles covered in blood. Rian took out his crossbow, loaded a bolt, aimed at the base of the skull, behind the ear. That's where the brain is closest to the surface. 1 shot. The boar twitched, went still. Done. In 9 days, Rian repaired the crossbow with sinew wrapping and set up a hunting system of snares and pit traps. He caught an 8-pooled boar and made a deal with the village elder, Kim Dogon, to give half of the large game in exchange for permission to hunt. Han Sol began learning to tan hides, and Yoon Mina fired her first shots from the crossbow. It took him 4 hours to drag the boar out. Alone. 8 pools of dead weight from a pit up to his chest. The rope cut into his palms through the rags. His collarbone screamed so much that his vision went dark. Twice he sat down in the snow and breathed. Just breathed. A minute. 2. Then he stood up and pulled some more. He tied the rope to a fir tree trunk, threw it over a lower branch. It made a lever. He pulled. The boar crawled out of the pit like a black mountain, slowly, on its back. When the carcass finally lay on the snow next to the pit, Rian sat down and didn't move for 10 minutes. His hands wouldn't obey him. His fingers were cramping. He looked at the boar and counted. 80 pounds of carcass, minus the hide, minus the bones, minus the innards. 60 pounds of lean meat, 10 pounds of fat, maybe 12. The boar was well fed. That meant it had been feeding where other animals couldn't find enough, somewhere deeper in the forest. The hide was coarse, thick, not suitable for trade. But you can make things from boar hide that you can't make from fox hide. Belts, boot soles, a crossbow case, bones for glue, hooves for glue. Glue is something they don't have at all in the village. And without glue, you can't fix anything. The gallbladder. Boar bile isn't as valuable as bear bile, but it's medicine too. Small intestines. They won't work for bowstrings, but you can make sausage casings out of them. Aunt Rana knows how. Bristles. They make brushes from boar bristles. That's how it was in the old world. Probably here too. I need to ask. Nothing should be left of the carcass. That's the main rule. Everything goes into the pot. Every pound, every bone, every scrap of hide. He butchered the boar right there. 3 hours. The knife dulled quickly. He sharpened it on a stone. Cut again. Sharpened again. He put the entrails in a burlap sack. He chopped the carcass into 4 pieces. 2 front quarters, 2 rear. The rear ones are heavier. He removed the hide in 1 piece, rolled it up, tied it off. 4 trips to the village. 4 times back and forth. Each trip took an hour and a half. He hauled the meat until dark. On the 3rd trip, he met Lee Jong-he. The foreman stood at the edge of the forest and watched. Rian was carrying a hindquarter on his shoulders. Blood had soaked through his coat. His face was gray with exhaustion. Lee Jun-ho looked silently at the meat, then at Rian. Then he turned and walked away. On the 4th trip, a neighbor helped, Park Young-soo, a quiet man of about 35, the very one who had lent him a sack of millet. He said nothing. He simply offered his shoulder and carried on. They dragged it together. People were already standing by the house. 5 of them, watching, silently. A wild boar in the village of Pyeongchon, the first in 2 years. Rian threw the meat onto the table in the yard. Aunt Rana came out. She saw it. She froze. Then she tied a white scarf around her head and started giving orders. She said we needed salt, finely ground, rock salt, not that junk they sell at the market. She said we needed a barrel for salting, a big one. She said the meat had to be cut up properly, not into chunks, but into parts. The ham separately, the ribs separately, the spine separately. Each part is salted differently. She knew this. She had been a cook at the estate 20 years ago. Her hands remembered. Rian stepped back, let her work. The salt helped. Mina hauled water. Things were moving along. By nightfall, half the carcass had been salted. Rian took the other half to the village headman. As agreed, Kim Do-gon accepted it silently, weighed it by eye. He nodded. He said nothing. But his wife, Park San-hee, peeked out from behind the door and looked at Rian for a long time. With interest, the way one looks at a person they are re-evaluating. On the 10th day, Rian did not go into the forest. He stayed home. He worked. He rendered fat from wild boar lard. 12 pounds of lard yielded 4 pounds of pure fat. He poured the fat into a clay pot. This fat would be used for candles, for soap, for lubricating the crossbow mechanism. He began boiling glue from the bones. hooves, and small bones. Split them open, cover with water. Simmer over low heat for half a day. Drain the liquid. Boil again. Drain again. Boil down to the consistency of honey. Let it cool. Glue. Mina sat nearby and watched. He explained. Why glue? What for? You can repair furniture with glue. You can glue cracked dishes back together. You can reinforce a bolt shaft. You can glue on feathers. Without glue, a hunter is like a man without hands. Mina listened. She nodded. Then she asked if she could write it down. Write it down? With what? She had neither paper nor ink. But she had birch bark and a piece of charcoal. Rian nodded. She left and returned an hour later with a bundle of birch bark and a stick charred at the end. She sat down next to him. She began to write. The letters were large, clumsy. She wrote poorly, but she wrote. Glue from bones, fat from lard. How many bones? How much water? How long to boil? The first entry. The first page of a future record book she didn't yet know about. On the 11th day, Rian went out to hunt a wolf. This was a whole new level. A wolf isn't a hare. A wolf is smart. A wolf is fast. It won't fall into a snare. Or a pit, either. You can only take a wolf with a bolt. Or poison bait. Rian didn't have any poison. So, a bolt. He found a wolf's trail as early as the 3rd day. A loner. Not part of a pack. Large. A male. It was moving along the edge of the forest, hunting the same hares as Rian. A direct competitor. A wolf pelt was worth 5 sacks of millet. Or a good knife. Or a seat at the elders' table. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a political move. He'd give the wolf pelt to the village elder. Not as part of his share. Just like that. A gift. An apology for going into the woods without asking. The village hadn't seen a pelt of this quality in 3 years. The elder wouldn't be able to refuse. It's too good. And to accept it means acknowledging that Rian is a hunter. Not a fool. A hunter. He found the wolf on the 4th hour. The beast lay at the edge of the clearing under an upturned root, asleep. Its gray fur almost blended with the snow. Only the black tip of its nose gave it away. 100 paces. Too far for this crossbow. Its range is 80. At 100, the bolt will travel in a steep arc and won't pierce the hide. He had to get closer. Rian lay down in the snow. He crawled. Slowly. Very slowly. The snow crunched beneath his body, but the wind was blowing from the wolf toward him. The scent wouldn't reach it. Neither would the crunching. The wind would drown it out. 50 paces. He froze. The wolf raised its head. Its nostrils twitched. Then it lay back down. It didn't smell him. Rian waited. 10 minutes. 20. The wolf raised its head again. Yawned. Stood up. Stretched. Rian raised the crossbow. The bolt was already in the groove. The string is taut. Finger on the trigger. 50 paces. Wind from the right. Light. Half a finger's width. Adjustment. High humidity. Minimal drift. The target is standing sideways. Ribs visible beneath the fur. Skinny. Hungry like everyone else here. The heart is behind the rib. He saw the spot to hit. Saw it as clearly as you see a red dot on a white wall. Between the 4th and 5th ribs, a palm's width below the spine. There. He exhaled. There was a pause between heartbeats, a short one. In this pause, the body is motionless. His hands don't tremble. The eye sees clearly. He caught that pause. He released the bowstring. The bolt entered the wolf precisely between the fourth and fifth ribs. The beast twitched, took 3 steps, fell, didn't get up. Rian lay in the snow for another 5 minutes. Didn't move. He waited. The wolf might still be alive. It might be playing dead. A wounded wolf is more dangerous than a healthy one. But this one wasn't playing dead. After 5 minutes, Rian approached. The wolf was dead. The bolt had gone straight through the heart. The hide was intact. The entry wound was small. A clean kill. He skinned it right there. Carefully. Not hurriedly. 1 cut from the throat, down the legs, pulling slowly. The hide came off like a stocking, in one piece, not a single hole. Beautiful. Thick winter fur, gray with silver. He butchered the carcass. Wolf meat is tough, not tasty, but edible, if cooked long enough. He returned to the village with a sack of meat and the pelt slung over his shoulder. He went straight to the village headman's house. Kim Dogon was sitting on the porch smoking a pipe. He saw Rian. He saw the pelt. The pipe froze halfway to his lips. Rian laid the pelt on the porch. He said it was a gift. He said it didn't count as a share, just gratitude for the village elder allowing him to hunt. Kim Dogon looked at the pelt for a long time. He touched the fur. Thick. Soft. A hide like this could be traded for an iron plow, or for 2 sacks of grain, or for a good steel axe. The village head looked at Rian. There was something new in his eyes. Not contempt. Not pity for a fool. Something else. Cautious. Wary. He took the pelt, nodded, said 1 word. Good. Rian turned and left. Behind him, he heard the village elder call his wife. He heard Pak San-hee gasp. He heard them standing there, examining the pelt. A wolf pelt. 1 bolt. Right through the heart. For 16 years, the village fool hadn't been able to tie his own bootlaces. And so, at home, Aunt Rana was cooking the wolf meat. For a long time. With herbs. She knew which herbs masked the smell. Wormwood and wild garlic. Salt sat atop the hides. 4 hare hides. 1 fox hide. All pelted the brain way. Soft. Supple. They don't break. They don't stink. You can sew a collar from the fox hide. Or a hat. The 4 hare hides are lining for a sheepskin coat. Warm. Lightweight. Rian sat down next to his wife. He looked at her work. Good. Even. But he saw that her hands were red, swollen from constant contact with water and brain matter. He said nothing. He stood up. He went over to the workbench. Workbench is a bit of an exaggeration. A piece of log by the wall. He picked up a boar's bone, a middle one, a femur, sturdy, and began to carve. With a knife. Slowly. A comb. A bone comb. 8 teeth. Wide. So it would fit comfortably in his hand. a small hand. He worked for 2 evenings. He carved small notches at the ends. A pattern, not initials. He didn't yet know how to write initials in the local script. Just a pattern. A wave, like the river that flowed past their village. When he finished, he placed the comb on the table in front of Saul. He said nothing. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, ran her finger along the teeth, along the wave at the end, looked at him. He had already turned away toward the crossbow, cleaning the mechanism. She stood there for a long time with the comb in her hand. Then she tucked it into her bosom and returned to the hides. That night, when they went to bed, she moved closer to him than usual. Not to his shoulder, to his chest. And he felt her fingers grip his shirt on his back. Once. Briefly. As if she were checking that he was real. Rian pulled the boar out of the pit and processed the carcass completely, from the meat to the fat and the glue from the bones. He killed a wolf with a single bolt to the heart and presented the pelt to the village elder as a political gesture, thereby forcing the village to reconsider its opinion of him. Yunmina began making her first notes on birch bark, and Han Sol received a bone comb from her husband and showed physical intimacy toward him for the first time. On the 12th day, their neighbor Park Yong-soo came, the very one who had given them the sack of millet. He stood in the yard. He fidgeted with his hat in his hands. He hesitated for a long time. Then he said he had come for the debt, not for the millet, for the labor. Spring labor meant 2 days in someone else's field, when there was a field, and when there was something to plant. But there was neither a field nor seeds, so the debt was on hold. Rian looked at the neighbor. The man looked terrible. His face was gray. His cheekbones were sharp. His wife was sick. 2 children, little ones, 3 and 5 years old. Hungry, too. On the brink, too. He brought out the sack, untied it. Inside were 12 pounds of salted wild boar meat. He handed it over. He said the debt was settled. Park Yeon-soo stood there looking at the meat. Then he bowed, deeply, to the waist. He left quickly, without looking back. Aunt Rana saw this from the stove. She said that Rian was a fool, that they needed the meat for themselves, that winter was long and every pound counted. Rian replied that the neighbor had helped carry the meat, and that the neighbor had 2 children. Aunt Rana fell silent. She turned away toward the cauldron. She muttered that he was a fool anyway, but her voice was soft. On the 13th day, Rian returned to the traps and found that 3 snares had been torn down. Not by animals, by a person. The stakes had been pulled from the ground, the ropes cut with a knife. A clean cut. Someone had found his snares and destroyed them. He stood over the ruined trap and thought, who? Why? The answer came quickly. Hunters. Someone from the village, most likely Li Zhonghuo's men. The foreman couldn't accept that a foolish boy was bagging game where seasoned hunters came up empty-handed. It was personal. It was an insult. It's easier to destroy the traps than to admit you've been doing something wrong for 40 years. Rian didn't get angry. Anger doesn't put food on the table. He set new snares, 3 of them. But this time in a different spot, deeper in, further from the trails the villagers used, to where he'd seen fresh hare tracks that others hadn't noticed. And he did one more thing. He set a control snare, not for a hare, for a human. More precisely, for their tracks. A thin thread stretched across the path at shin height. If anyone walked through, the thread would snap and get caught on a bush. Rian would know they'd been there. On the 14th day, he didn't go into the forest. Instead, he went to the river. The river had frozen over a week ago. The ice was thick, about 1.5 feet. It would hold a person. Rian chiseled a hole with a boar's tusk. He had sharpened the tusk and attached it to a stick. It made for a crooked chisel, but it cut through the ice. It took him an hour to break through. When water began to seep from beneath the ice, he crouched down and watched. The water was black, cold, fast-moving. So there's a current. So there are fish, even in winter. Fish don't die in a frozen river. They go deep, they slow down, but they eat slowly. He needs a fishing rod. He needs a hook. A bone hook, curved, sharpened. He'd made 3 such hooks from boar ribs the night before. Small ones, for small fish. The line was made of hemp thread, thin. The bait is a piece of hare intestine. He sat by the hole for 4 hours. Caught 2 fish, small ones, each the size of a palm. But it's fish, protein, fat, and most importantly, it's knowledge. The river is working. There are fish. If you make a float out of willow twigs, you can fish without a rod. Set up the trap and check it once a day. On the 15th day, Mina asked to go with him into the woods. She didn't ask. She said she was going. Her tone was such that he didn't want to argue. Rian looked at her. Skinny, red-haired. Her nose red from the cold. Her eyes were stubborn. She was 14 years old and had lived on the edge for 3 years. People like that either break or become stronger than everyone around them. Mina hadn't broken. He nodded. He let her carry a coil of rope and a bag for the catch. He carried the crossbow and bolts himself. In the woods, he showed her. He didn't tell her. He showed her. Here's a hare's track. See? 2 long paw prints in front, 2 short ones behind. The distance between the pairs of tracks shows the speed. The farther apart they are, the faster it ran. This hare was walking calmly. It wasn't running. So it's safe. Mina watched. She memorized it. She touched the track with her finger. She asked how many hours ago. He replied that it was 6, maybe 7. The snow at the edges of the track had started to freeze over. The crust was thin. If the track were fresh, there wouldn't be a crust. She nodded. She wrote it down later at home on a piece of bark. A hare's track, 6 hours old. A crust at the edges. He showed her how to set a snare. A peg, a rope, a loop. Height from the ground, distance from the trail. She set it herself. Her hands were shaking. Her fingers wouldn't obey her in the cold. But she set it. Crooked. He adjusted it. 2 fingers to the left, a finger higher. She fixed it again. By herself this time. Better. On the way back, she asked why he was doing this. Not for hunting, that's all. Why had he changed at all? Why had he stopped stuttering? Why go into the woods every day? Why show her? Rian walked and thought about what to say. He couldn't tell the truth. She wouldn't believe him. And there was no point. He answered simply. He said she had no parents. And Saul didn't either. And just an aunt. He said that if something happened to him, they had to be able to manage on their own. feed themselves, set traps, shoot a crossbow themselves, because no one else would be there. Mina was silent all the way to the village. She stopped by the house, looked at him, said she'd go tomorrow too, and went inside. On the 16th day, Lee Jong-he came on his own. Not to the village head, to Rian. He stood by the fence, crossbow on his back, spear in his hand. His face was stony. He said he wanted to see. Rian asked what exactly. The foreman said he wanted to see the fool shoot. Because people say. They say he hits a grouse in the eye from 80 paces. They say he hits a wolf in the heart with a single bolt. So that's what he wants to see. With his own eyes. Rian nodded. He hung a piece of bark on the fence. He stepped back 60 paces. He loaded the bolt. He fired. The bolt went right into the center of the bark. Clean shot. Lee Jong-he walked over. He looked at the bark. He looked at Rian. He stepped back 60 paces. He raised his crossbow. An old one. Heavy. The shoulders were made of solid wood. The bowstring was thick, rough. He fired. The bolt landed on the palm to the right of the bark. Missed. The sergeant clenched his jaw. He stepped back 40 paces. He fired. He hit. But the edge of the bark, not the center. He turned to Rian, stood silently, for 20 seconds. Then asked, "How?" Just one word. How? Rian could have stayed silent, could have smirked, could have savored the moment. But he didn't. Because this man had fed the village for 40 years. This man had lost friends in the woods. This man deserved an answer. Rian walked over. He took the foreman's crossbow. Heavy. 12 pounds. He looked at the shoulders. Wooden. Oak. Strong, but not flexible. The effort is great, but the travel is short. The bolt gains a lot of energy at the start, but quickly loses speed. That's why it hits well at 40 paces, but not at 60. The string is thick, heavy. It slows down the acceleration. And it's also sitting crooked. The left end is half a finger higher than the right. Because of this, the bolt veers to the right. Rian explained all this. Calmly, without condescension. He demonstrated, pulled the bowstring tight, straightened it out, gave it back. Said the bowstring needed to be replaced, with a thinner one, made from deer tendon, if available, and the limbs needed to be replaced entirely. Wood on wood won't do. You need horn, tendon, and wood together, 3 layers. Then the limbs will be flexible and powerful. A bolt at 60 paces will strike as hard as Lee Jong-he's at 20. The sergeant listened. His face didn't change. Stone-faced. But his eyes were different. There was no more malice in them. There was something else. He asked where Rian had learned all this. Rian answered the same as he had to his wife. His head snapped back into place. Jong-he looked at him for a long time. Then he said he didn't believe it. He said that no ice teaches you how to shoot, or how to draw a crossbow, or how to strike a wolf in the heart. But he said it didn't mean. If Rian could do it, and if the village was well fed, he didn't care where it came from. He turned and left. It was a turning point. Not a loud one, not a grand one, but an important one. Lee Jong-he didn't become a friend. He didn't become an ally. But he stopped being an enemy, and his men no longer touched the snares. On the 17th day, Rian began building a smokehouse. There was a lot of meat. You can't salt everything. Salt is expensive. There isn't enough of it. Smoking is cheaper. You need smoke and time. A smokehouse is a pit in the ground. Above the pit is a shelter made of poles. The poles are coated with clay. Inside are hooks made of bent branches. You hang the meat on the hooks. At the bottom of the pit is a fire of green alder. Alder gives off thick, cold smoke. The meat hangs in this smoke for 3 days. Then it can be stored for months. He dug the pit behind the house. Mina helped. She hauled clay from the river. Salt the meat into strips, long ones, thin ones, for smoking. Aunt Rana stood nearby and gave orders. How much salt per pound, what herbs to add to the smoke. She knew the recipe, an old one, from the estate, wormwood and juniper berries. This gives the meat a taste and smell that no one here knows. 2 days later, the smokehouse was ready. The first batch of meat hung on hooks. Alder smoke seeped from the cracks. The smell drifted through the village. By evening, 4 people were standing by the fence. They watched. They sniffed. They were silent. They didn't make smoked meat in Pyeongchon. They didn't know how. They salted and dried it. That was all. Smoking was something from city life, from that life that took place somewhere far beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, where people live who have everything. On the 20th day, what Rian had been waiting for happened. Park Do-ho, 13 years old, the son of their neighbor, Park Yeon-soo, the very same man who had given them the sack of millet. The boy came in the morning. He sat on the porch, silently. He didn't leave. Mina looked at him from the window. She looked at Rian. Rian went out. He sat down next to him. They were silent for about 5 minutes. Then the boy said he wanted to learn. He didn't say what, just to learn. Rian looked at him. Skinny. Hands big for his age. So he'll grow up to be big. Eyes serious, not childlike. Children who go hungry for 3 years quickly stop being children. He nodded, said tomorrow morning at dawn. Bring a knife, if you have one. Pak Do-ho stood up. He bowed. He left. Rian watched him go and thought. 1 student is a start. 1 student who learns to set snares means 10 more hares a week. 2 students means 20. 5 students is a team. A team is a system that works without him. Because he isn't immortal. This body is weak. His collarbone aches every day. His hands shake after the 3rd shot. If he breaks down, everything will go back to the way it was, unless he teaches others. That evening, Saul set a bowl of porridge in front of him, thick, with chunks of smoked pork. The first rich porridge in 3 years. He ate and felt how his body absorbed every calorie, how his muscles begged for more, how his bones begged for more. His body was recovering. Slowly, but it was recovering. Saul stood behind him. She didn't leave. He didn't turn around. He ate. She stood there. 20 minutes later, she left. It became a habit. Every evening, she would set out a bowl, stand behind him, watch him eat, then leave. He didn't ask why. She didn't explain. It was enough for both of them. Rian paid off his debt to his neighbor with meat and discovered that one of the hunters was destroying his traps. Lee Jong-ho came to test Rian's marksmanship, and after the demonstration, he ceased to be his opponent. A smokehouse was built according to Aunt Rana's recipe, and Park Do-ho became the first apprentice. On the 21st day, Rian took Do-ho into the forest. The boy arrived before dawn, with a knife, a small one, a dull one, but a knife. Mina came too, without asking. She stood nearby with a crossbow on her back. Rian looked at both of them. Two teenagers, two hungry kids who wanted to learn how not to go hungry. He nodded. Let's go. In the forest, he split them up. He had Mina check the eastern trails, 6 of them. She knew the route. She'd walked it with him 4 times. She'd manage. Doko led her to the river. He showed her how to read tracks. Here's a deer track. Old. 5 days old. Not worth following. It went far away. Here's a fox's. Fresh. From today. The fox was here at dawn. It was heading toward the river. It drank water from an unfrozen pool. So there's a pool. That means we can set a trap there. Doko listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask stupid questions. A grown-up child. They reached the river. They found a pool. A small one. 2 steps wide. The current was fast. The water was black. Rian took out the fish trap. He had woven it last night from willow twigs, a basket with a narrow opening at the top. The fish swim in and can't find their way out. He put bait inside, a piece of rabbit intestine. He lowered it into the water, tied it with a rope to a stake on the bank. He showed Do-ho. Explained. Check once a day, in the morning. The fish go for the bait at night. In the morning, the basket is full. If it's empty, that means the bait is gone. Change it. Doko remembered. On the way back, Mina came out of the woods with 2 hares. One was alive, twitching in the sack. The other was dead. She carried them proudly, her first independent catch. Rian looked at the hares, at the snares. Both hares had been caught in snares she had set herself. They were set crookedly, but they worked. He said that was good. Mina turned away, but he could see her ears had turned red. Not from the cold. On the 22nd day, 2 more arrived. The Nam brothers. Nam Jin-ho was 15. Nam Tae-gu was 12. The sons of a widow. Their father had died in the forest 2 years ago. He'd gone after a nocturnal beast with 3 hunters. 2 returned. Without him. They never found his body. The brothers stood in the yard and looked at the smokehouse, at the meat hanging on hooks, at the hides drying on the frame, at Mina, who was sitting on the porch and writing something on birch bark. Rian came out. He looked. 2. Now 4, including Mina and Do-ho. 4 apprentices. He nodded. Tomorrow at dawn. Bring knives if you have them. On the 23rd day in the forest, there were already 4 young ones. Mina was checking the snares. Do-ho was checking the traps. The Nam brothers walked with Rian and learned to read tracks. Nam Jin-ho was quiet, serious, strong hands. He was good at climbing trees. Nam Tae-gu was lively, quick. He was constantly turning his head. He noticed everything. He was the first to spot the partridge on the branch that Rian had missed. He'll make a good observer, or a spotter. Rian assigned the roles in his head. Mina keeps track and sets snares. Do-ho catches fish and carries heavy loads. Jin-ho will be the beater. Tae-gu will be the spotter. That leaves him with the shooting and the traps for big game. And the leadership. Leadership is the most important thing. That day, they bagged 4 hares and 1 hazel grouse. Rian took down the hazel grouse from 60 paces, a bolt to the neck. Slightly lower than he aimed, the stock moved. I need to replace the shoulders. The wooden ones are no longer any good. I need composite ones, and for the composite ones, I need a horn. And tendons, large ones, deer or ox, and a blacksmith who can make the cocking mechanism. On the evening of the 24th day, Rian sat at the table and thought. In 4 days the collector will come. There's meat in the barn, salted and smoked, hides, 14 hare hides, 2 fox hides, dried fish, not much, but there is some, enough for the tribute, and enough to live on, for a month, maybe a month and a half. The first goal is accomplished. The barn isn't empty. The roof is repaired. Doko helped. They patched the hole with a boar hide and smeared it with clay. Now it doesn't leak. Salt no longer spills onto his eyebrows with frost. But that's not enough. That's survival, not life. Life requires more. He needs a smithy. We need proper arrowheads. We need new crossbows. We need a tannery, a real one, not a corner in the house, but a separate building with vats and frames. We need trade ties with the city to sell furs and buy salt and iron. We need people, more than 4 teenagers. We need adults, hunters, who will take him seriously. Li Zhonghe stopped getting in the way, but he didn't start helping either. The village elder took the pelt and nodded, but nothing more. The village watched, waited. Rian understood. One good hunt doesn't change a 16-year-old's reputation. It takes time. It takes consistency. Every household needs to see that meat comes not just once in a while, but every day. On the 25th day, he found something strange in the forest. He was following a new route, deeper than usual, almost at the edge of the forbidden forest, the boundary that the locals marked with notches on the trees and beyond which they didn't go unless necessary. There he saw a clearing, a small one, about 30 paces across. The snow on it was black, not dirty, not from the ground. Black, as if it had been sprinkled with soot. But there was no soot. He touched the snow. Ordinary. Cold, but black. Bones lay at the edge of the clearing. Deer bones. Several skeletons. Scattered. But not the way predators scatter them. A predator breaks the bones and scatters them around the resting places. Here the bones lay neatly, almost in a circle, as if the deer had lain down themselves and died. There were teeth marks on the bones, but not from wolves, and not from bears. The teeth were larger, wider, with grooves. Teeth like that don't tear flesh. Teeth like that crush bone, crumble it, grind it down. He stood at the edge of the clearing and watched. In the center, where the black snow was especially thick, the ground was sinking slightly, as if there were a void beneath the clearing. He crouched down. He pressed his ear to the ground. Silence. No, not silence. A very faint sound, deep below, far away, as if something were slowly, very slowly, 1 breath per minute. He stood up, stepped back, memorized the spot, and left. Quickly, without looking back. He didn't run, but he walked faster than usual. On the 26th and 27th days he worked, snares, training. Mina was already setting snares as well as he was. Doko hauled 20 pounds of fish from the snares in 2 days. The Nam brothers learned to drive hares into the snares, not by shouting, quietly, slowly, just walking in a chain 30 paces apart. Hares run from noise. They follow their own trails. And there were snares on the trails. The drive yielded 8 to 10 hares a day. The meat went to the smokehouse. The skins went to Saul. The bones went into glue. Nothing went to waste. Mina kept a record, every day. How many hares, how much fish, how many pounds of meat salted, how many hides were tanned. There wasn't enough birch bark left. She started writing in smaller handwriting. On the 28th day, the tax collector arrived. His name was Cho Moon-sik, a middle-aged man with a thin mustache and a sallow face. He arrived on a single horse with 2 assistants on donkeys. The assistants were burly, with clubs, not to defend against wild animals, for the villagers who refused to pay. Cho Moon-sik stayed at the village headman's house. It was tradition. 2 days. The first day was for inventory. The second day was for collection. He inventoried every household, what they had, what they didn't, how much they owed. Those who didn't pay were marked down. 3 marks, and the household was transferred to the Sun family. Land, house, people, everything. Pyeongchon was in debt for the previous 2 years. 2 unpaid taxes. A third failure to pay meant the end. The village would be handed over entirely to the Sun household. All 40 households. All the residents would become servants of the household. Not slaves, formally, but in essence, the difference was small. Cho Moon-sik began his rounds at the eastern edge of the village. He went from yard to yard. He took notes. He wrote in a notebook. His expression didn't change. No sympathy, no anger, just work. Rian's house was the last, the very end, the poorest. It had always been that way. The collector approached the gate. He peered into the yard and stopped. In the yard stood a smokehouse from which smoke was rising. Skins were drying on a frame. 14 hare skins, 2 fox skins, 1 boar. 2 small barrels stood against the wall. Rian opened the barn. Inside, meat lay on the shelves, salted, smoked. Dried fish on strings. In the corner, a sack of fish oil. On the wall, bundles of tendons. Bone hooks on a string. Glue in a pot. Cho Moon-sik looked at it without blinking. He had been traveling through the northern villages for 4 years. He had seen Pyeongchon die. In the courtyards, on the heads of people. Every year less smoke from the chimneys. Every year fewer people at the well. And here it was, a granary, full, in the poorest yard in the village, in the yard of the bereaved. He turned to Rian. He looked. Rian stood calmly. Next to him, Han Sol, Aunt Rana, Yoon Mina with birch bark in her hands. Mina stepped forward. She handed the bark to the collector. There were notes on the bark, every day for 28 days. How much was harvested? How much meat? How many hides? How much fish? How much glue? Everything was calculated. Cho Moon-sik took the bark. He read it. He looked up at the girl. She is 14 and keeps like the capital's treasurer. He said nothing. He wrote it down in his notebook. He accepted the tribute. 2 fox pelts and 20 pounds of smoked wild boar meat. That covered the current levy. There was still a debt from the past 2 years, but the collector did not press the matter. He saw the barn. He saw the smokehouse. He saw the pelts. A village that can pay is not subject to transfer. That is the rule. He left the next day, quietly, no clubs. But Rian saw the collector glance back at their yard, twice, and how he then wrote something at length in a notebook while sitting in the saddle. It was a denunciation. Rian knew it. Too much for a fool's yard, too fast. The Sun household would receive that letter in a week. In 2 weeks, they'll start asking questions. In a month, someone more serious than the collector will arrive. Time is short. That evening, Rian sat at the table. The bowl was empty. Saul stood behind him. Aunt Rana was clearing the dishes. Mina was writing on bark by candlelight. Quiet. Warm. For the first time in 28 days, it wasn't cold or hungry. Rian looked at his family and thought. 28 days. The granary is full. The roof is intact. 4 apprentices. The debt is paid off. The debt was paid. The first goal was achieved. He turned to Saul. He said he would go look for a blacksmith tomorrow. Saul looked at him. She didn't ask why. She had already gotten used to not asking. She just nodded and cleared away his bowl. And at that moment, Mina looked up from the bark and said she had run out of bark, that she needed paper, real paper, and ink. Rian looked at her. 14 years old, red-haired, skinny, with a piece of charcoal in her hand and notes on a bark. Pyeongchon's chief accountant. He nodded, said there would be paper and ink. Mina nodded and went back to her notes, as if it were a given, as if the man who 28 days ago couldn't string 2 words together could now do anything. And she believed him. It was strange and heartwarming at the same time. Chapter summary. During the last week before the tax collector's arrival, Rian taught 4 teenagers the basics of hunting and set up a drive system yielding 8 to 10 hares a day. At the edge of the forbidden forest, he discovered a clearing with black snow and deer bones bearing traces of inhuman teeth, and heard breathing underground. The tax collector, Cho Mun-sik, accepted the full tax, but wrote a report to the Sun household about the inexplicable prosperity of the village's poorest household. On the 29th day, Rian left the village, not toward the forest, but onto the southern road. It was 20 versts through the snow to the town of Cholsong, a whole day's walk. In the sack on his back were 10 pounds of smoked wild boar meat, 2 fox pelts from the oak forest, a pot of bone glue, a bundle of sinew threads. These were his goods. He needed 3 things: iron for arrowheads, salt for the meat, and a blacksmith. Han Sol stood by the gate and watched him leave. She didn't ask him to come back. She didn't ask him to stay. She just stood there. He said he'd be back in 2 days. She nodded. He saw her fingers clench the edge of her apron. Once. Briefly. Then let go. The road led through a barren field, then through a copse, then through a swamp, frozen solid. There were almost no tracks. Few people traveled south in winter. No sleigh tracks were visible. Trade had died 3 years ago, along with the grain. By evening, he reached Cheolsong. The town stood at the crossroads of 2 trade routes, 300 households, a market, shops, a blacksmith shop, an inn, the temple of the North Star on a hill with a blue dome. By Pyeongchon standards, this was the capital. The market was already closing. Merchants were packing up their wares. Rian walked through the rows. There was iron. Expensive. A pound of wrought iron would cost 3 fox pelts. In the south, a pound costs 1. But the south is far away and winter is near. There was salt. A sack of rock salt cost a wolf pelt. He gave the wolf pelt to the village elder, so salt would have to wait. First, the blacksmith. He asked the meat vendor where to find an iron worker. The vendor waved his hand toward the outskirts, said there was an old man named Yoon, but he doesn't work. He's been drinking for 3 years. His wife had died. His son had gone to the capital. The smithy was cold. Rian went. He found the smithy by the sign, an iron horseshoe on a post, rusty. The yard was overgrown. The fence lay in the snow. The smithy door was open. It was dark inside, cold. The forge was dead. The anvil was rusted. Empty bottles lay on the floor. A man was lying on a bench by the wall, gray-haired, thin. His beard was matted. His clothes were dirty. It smelled of booze and long-standing grief. Yun Dal-Su, the former blacksmith of the Sun household. For 20 years he had forged weapons for the guards. Then he had a falling out with the manager. He left for Chulsong, opened his own workshop, worked for another 20 years. Then he broke down. Rian learned this on the way from the neighbors. People are eager to talk about other people's misfortunes. Rian went inside, stood there, looked at the sleeper's hands. Large, wide palms, thick fingers, old calluses, deeply ingrained. 3 years of drinking hadn't erased 40 years of hammering. He crouched on the edge of the bench. He took some smoked wild boar meat out of his bag. He unwrapped the cloth. The smell wafted through the dead smithy. Thick, warm, lively. The old man sniffed, opened one eye. Cloudy, red. Looked at the meat, looked at Rian. He closed his eye. Rian hadn't left. He was sitting there, waiting. 10 minutes later, the old man opened both eyes. He sat up, groaning. His bones creaked. He looked at the meat, then at the young man. He asked hoarsely who he was and what he wanted. Rian spoke plainly. He said he was from Pyeongchon, that he needed a blacksmith, not for a day or a week, for good. He said there was meat, lots of meat. There would be even more. He said he needed tips for crossbow bolts, a cocking mechanism, knives, tools. He said that the master's hands were the most valuable thing in this smithy, and he was wasting them on a bottle. Yun Dal-Su looked at him for a long time. Then he laughed. The wheeze turned into a cough. He coughed for a minute, spit. Said the kid was bold, that Pyeongchon was a backwater that would soon be written off, that he wasn't going anywhere, that he was 60 years old and tired. Rian stood up. He placed the meat on the bench next to him. He set down the pot of glue. He laid out the sinew threads. He said he was leaving these behind. He said he'd be back in a month. If the master changed his mind, he should be ready. If not, let him eat and be well. And he left. He didn't look back. He knew the old man was watching him go, and that he would look at the meat afterward, and that he would look at his own hands afterward. In the morning, Rian walked through the market a second time. Now he wasn't looking for goods, but for a person. A merchant who would travel to Pyeongchon to buy hides and meat, to sell iron and salt. A middleman. He found a furrier's shop, small, cramped. It smelled of tanned leather and smoke. A young woman sat behind the counter, about 22 years old. Her hair was tucked under a dark scarf. Her fingers were quick. She counted the coins on the table without missing a beat. So Ha-in, the daughter of the merchant So Byung-chol. Her father was away. She ran the business alone. Rian placed 2 fox pelts on the counter. So Ha-in took one. She felt the fur. Thick. Soft. She checked the split. Flexible. Didn't break. Didn't smell. She bent it in half. It didn't crack. She straightened it. Not a trace. Oak bark. She looked up. There were no such skins at the market. The locals tanned with ash and bark. The skins turned out stiff. They broke after a month. These were different. She asked who had tanned them. Rian replied that his wife had. So Ha-in raised an eyebrow. She asked the price. Rian named his price, a sack of rock salt and 2 pounds of iron for the pair. So Ha-in gave a short laugh. She said that was double the market rate. Rian replied that the market price was for market goods. But these hides won't fall apart in a month. These will last 5 years. Sell them in the capital and you'll get triple the price. She looked at him closely. Country folk don't haggle like that. Country folk cringe and accept the first offer. This one stood his ground. He didn't back down. He didn't get nervous. She said half a sack of salt and a pound. He said a sack and a half. She said a sack and a pound. And that's the last word. He nodded. While she was weighing the iron, he told her there would be more. Every month. Fox pelts, hare pelts, wolf pelts, smoked meat with juniper, dried fish, bone glue, tendon threads, bear bile. He listed them calmly, like a man who knows exactly what he has and what's coming. Ha-in stopped weighing. She watched. The expression in her eyes shifted. Not interest in a man, interest in business. She saw goods that didn't exist on the market. No one made bone glue. No one sold sinew threads. Brain oak was unfamiliar to her. It was a niche, an empty one, and this guy from the dead village was going to fill it. She said that if the supply was steady and the quality remained the same, she would come herself. To look, to assess the volume, maybe set up a supply chain. Rian nodded. In a month. She nodded. He took the sack of salt and the pound of iron and left. The return trip took the whole next day. He walked and thought. The blacksmith didn't go, not yet. But he took the meat, which meant he would eat, which meant he would think. The old man drank not out of laziness, out of emptiness. He had nowhere to put his hands. Hands that remembered 40 years of iron. In a month, Rian would come again. He would bring a blueprint. He would show the old man something he had never seen before. A mechanism that didn't exist in any smithy in the north. Craft heals. He knew that. With Hain, it's different. A partner. She calculated the profit in 10 seconds. A woman who runs a shop alone in a place where women behind the counter aren't welcome. That means she's smart. That means she's stubborn. That means she's useful. He returned to Pyeongchon on the night of the 30th. He slipped quietly into the house, set the sack of salt by the stove, lay down. The salt wasn't sleeping. He could tell by her breathing. But she didn't turn around, and he didn't speak. In the morning, Aunt Rana saw the sack. She untied it. She touched it. Rock salt, fine-grained, the very kind she had asked for. She stood over the sack and said nothing. Then she tied a white scarf around her head. She turned to Rian. Her voice was different. Not the one she used to scold with. Lively, commanding. She said that now they could salt things properly. Not with that junk. With real salt. Rock salt. Fine-grained. And that there should be herbs. Wormwood. Wild garlic. Just like at the manor. Just like 20 years ago. She turned toward the stove and began to work. Her back was straight, a white headscarf. The cook had returned. Rian went to Cholsong, where he found the drunkard blacksmith Yun Dal-su, and left him some meat as bait for future cooperation. He concluded his first trade deal with So Ha-in, who appreciated the quality of the brain oak and agreed to regular deliveries. Aunt Rana received rock salt and returned to her true craft for the first time in 3 years. The next 30 days followed the system Rian had set up as a schedule. In the morning, the forest. Snares, fishing on the river. In the afternoon, butchering and processing. In the evening, repairs and training. At night, drawings. He slept 4 hours. His body demanded more, but the work couldn't wait. The snares yielded 6 to 10 hares a day, consistently. The traps yielded fish. Not many, 2 or 3 palm-sized. But a squirrel is a squirrel. Once every 5 days, he went far away and hunted a large animal. On the 35th day, a second boar. 6 poods. Fat. On the 40th, a roe deer. On the 45th day, an elk. An old male that was limping on his hind leg and had strayed from the herd. 1 shot to the neck at 70 paces. An elk is 30 poods of meat, plus the hide, plus the antlers, plus tendons as long as an arm. That's exactly what you need for composite shoulders. He hauled the meat for 2 days, 14 trips. Doho helped. On the 3rd trip, Park Yeon-soo showed up. He silently offered his shoulder. On the 5th, 2 more from neighboring yards came. No one asked. They came on their own. They saw the guy hauling and came. After the kaum, Rian gathered the people. Not the whole village, just those who would listen. 6 of them. Park Yeon-soo, his wife, 2 more men, 2 women. He stood before them in the yard. He spoke briefly. He said that winter is long, and 1 hunter feeds 4. 10 hunters feed 100. He needs people. Not hunters. Workers. Someone to set snares. Someone to check the snares. Someone to haul firewood for the smokehouse. Someone to help saw with the tannery. In exchange for meat. Every day. For every household that participates. The 6 exchanged glances. Park Yeon-soo nodded first. His wife followed. Then the rest. All 6. 7 households out of 40. The beginning. On the 48th day, he took a bear. An ordinary brown one. Not a night bear. An old male who had come out of his den early. It happens. A warm winter confuses the beast's clock. The bear was thin and vicious, but slow. 1 shot to the side, just past the ribs. The heart. The bear took 10 steps and fell. Bear bile. A pot. Small. but worth more than anything Rian had earned in a month. Bear fat, 3 pounds. Medicine. Ointment for frostbite. Aunt Rana knew the recipe. From the estate. A large hide. Heavy. You need a bear's brain for the tanning vat. There's just enough for its own hide. That's how nature works. Saul worked on it for 4 days. Her hands turned red, swollen. Her skin cracked from constant contact with water and brain pulp. She didn't complain. Rian noticed. He didn't say anything to her. In the evening, he sat down at the workbench. The workbench was a piece of log against the wall. He took a boar's shoulder blade, a flat, wide bone. He began to carve. Not a comb, a shoulder blade, a tool for scraping hides, a flat scraper with a comfortable handle, fitted for a small hand. The edge was thin but not sharp, so as to scrape off the flesh without cutting through the hide. He worked for 2 evenings. On the 3rd, he set it down in front of Sol. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. She ran her finger along the handle. She tested the grip. The handle fit her palm like a glove. She looked at him. He had already turned away to the crossbow, cleaning the trigger mechanism. She stood with the scraper in her hand and said nothing. Then she put it in the pocket of her apron and returned to the hide. Her movements became faster, more confident. A tool made for her hand changed everything. Between hunting and processing, Rian was preparing the smithy. An old shed on the edge of the village. Stone walls, sturdy. The roof was full of holes. He repaired it with doko, boar hide and clay. He marked out a spot for the forge. He cleared the chimney. There was no anvil. He found a granite boulder on the riverbank. Flat, heavy. The 4 of them dragged it on a sled made of poles. They set it down. Not perfect, but it'll do for now. I sewed the bellows from boar hide, 2 pieces, with wooden frames between them. A valve made of thin hide. You pump it and air goes into the tube. The tube goes into the bellows. The bellows puffs. Primitive, but it works. Everything was ready. He was waiting for the blacksmith. On the 55th day, he went to Cholsong for the 2nd time, with a sack of goods, with Mina. The girl walked beside him, 20 versts through the snow. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for a rest. She walked. In the sack on his back were papers on birch bark, all the records from the past 2 months. At the market, he led her to So-hyun's stall. The merchant was there. She saw Rian. She saw the girl. She looked at the sack. Rian laid out the goods. 6 fox pelts from the Brain Dubka, 20 pounds of smoked wild boar with juniper, a pot of bear bile. So-hyun took the pot, opened it, sniffed it, closed it, looked at Rian. Bear bile in the capital goes for 5 silver coins a pot. Here, she'll get 3, plus 3 pounds of iron, plus 2 sacks of salt, plus 20 ells of cloth, and something else. She reached under the counter, pulled out a bundle. Paper, real paper, rice paper, 50 sheets, and a bottle of ink. She looked at Mina, said she'd heard about a girl who kept records on birch bark, said you wouldn't get very far with bark. Mina took the paper, pressed it to her chest, looked at the shopkeeper, then at Rian, said a quiet, "Thank you." The first thank you in 2 months. On the way back, she walked faster, almost ran. At home, she sat by candlelight and copied the notes from the bark onto the paper until nightfall. The letters were smaller, neater, a different person. On the 58th day, Rian went to the smithy in Cholsong for the third time. Alone, without any goods, only with birch bark on which drawings were sketched. A goat's foot, a crossbow cocking mechanism, a lever with a hinge, a bowstring catch. A single movement of the hand, and the bowstring is drawn with 3 times more force than by hand. A standard design from the 13th century in that world, unknown here. Yun Dal-su sat on a bench, sober, the second day. The meat had long since run out, but the smithy was cleaner. The bottles were put away. The floor was swept. The anvil was wiped down. The old man was waiting. Maybe not for Rian. Maybe he was just waiting. But he was waiting. Rian placed the drawing in front of him. The old man leaned in. He looked at it for a long time. He ran his finger along the lines. He looked up. There was something in his eyes that Rian recognized immediately. Hunger. Not physical. Artistic. The hunger of a craftsman who hadn't made anything in 3 years and saw something he hadn't seen in 40 years of work. Yun Dal-su asked quietly where it came from. Rian answered as always, long winter nights. The old man smiled. He said that everyone has nights like that, but not everyone has drawings like this. But he didn't press the matter. He looked at the drawing again. Then he stood up. He walked over to the forge. He touched the stones. He turned to Rian. He told him when to leave. They left Cholsong the next morning. Yun Dal-su carried a bag. In the bag was a hammer. Nothing else. Just a hammer. Within 30 days, the cooperative of 7 households began operating, providing a steady supply of meat and hides. Rian had hunted a bear and an elk, securing raw materials for trade and craftsmanship. Yun Dal-su entered the old smithy and stood in silence for 5 minutes. He looked at the walls, at the forge that wasn't there yet, at the spot where it would go, at the granite anvil, at the bellows made of boar skin. Then he turned to Rian and said he'd seen worse, that at the Sun family's estate, his first anvil had been a tree stump, that he'd build the forge in 3 days if there was clay and bricks. There was clay, a layer of it on the riverbank, blue, rich, good. There were no bricks, but they could mold and fire them. For 3 days they built the kiln. Rian and Doho hauled the clay from the river in buckets. The Nam brothers mixed it. Master Yun shaped the bricks with his hands. Quickly, precisely. Every brick the same size. They fired them on the bonfire. They laid them out in rows. On the 4th day, the kiln stood. Square. Stocky. A bit crooked. But when the old man lit the first fire and the bellows drove air into the interior, the heat was such that it was impossible to stand closer than 2 steps away. Master Yun placed a pound of iron on the coals. The iron turned red, then yellow. The old man pulled it out with tongs, placed it on the granite, raised the hammer, and struck. The ringing echoed through the village. Clear, high-pitched. The first blow of a hammer in Pyeongchon in 20 years. People stopped in the street. They listened. A second blow. A third. Sparks flew. The iron was changing. From a lump to a strip. From a strip to a shape. By evening, 6 bolt heads lay on the anvil. Four-sided, narrow, piercing, with a groove along the edge so the bolt wouldn't get stuck in the bone. Rian picked one up, turned it over. The balance was right. The edges were even. The tip was symmetrical. On the curved anvil made of river stone, using the lopsided bellows made from boar hide, the old man made bolt heads better than they do in the city forges. Because of his hands. Hands don't forget. 2 days later, Master Yoon began work on the goat's leg. According to the blueprint, a hinge, a lever, a catch. There was little iron. Every piece counted. The old man worked slowly. He tried it on, he adjusted it, he hammered it. He tried it on again. 5 days. On the 6th, he placed the finished mechanism on the table. Rough, heavy, but it worked. Rian mounted it on the old crossbow, hooked the bowstring, pressed the lever. The bowstring drew back in a single motion, easily, without straining. His left hand didn't tremble. His collarbone was silent. He could cock it 10 times in a row and his arm wouldn't tire. That changed everything. Not a single shot followed by a long pause. 10 shots in a row. But the crossbow was old. The wooden limbs couldn't withstand the force generated by the goat's foot. On the 5th pull, the right limb snapped. A dry, short sound. Rian laid the fragments on the table. He looked at the master. He said he needed new limbs, composite ones, 3 layers. Wood at the core, horn along the outer edge, tendon along the inner edge, all held together with glue. The old man nodded. He said he used to make such things at court, for the guards. We need antler, bull or deer. We need large tendons. We need ash or elm for the base. We need strong glue. Rian found the antler in the forest. He sent Doko and the brothers. Deer shed their antlers every spring. The antlers lie in the forest for years and don't rot. They found 4, old but hard as stone. The tendons were from a moose, long, strong. The glue was bone glue. The ash tree grew by the river. The craftsman began. The base was made of ash, a thin plate, flexible. On top, the horn was cut into strips. On the bottom, the tendon was split into fibers. Layer by layer. Each layer required glue and a day of drying. 5 layers, 5 days. Then wrapping with sinew thread. Then more drying. 2 weeks on a pair of shoulders. The old man worked without stopping. He ate by the forge. He slept on a bench in the smithy. Aunt Rana brought him food 3 times a day. Hot food. Porridge with meat. She took him under her wing as she might have taken in a stray cat. She grumbled that the old man didn't eat properly, that he slept fully clothed, that his beard was like a mop. The old man snapped back. But he ate his food. And one morning, Rana noticed that his beard had been trimmed. Crookedly, but trimmed. She said nothing. She set down the bowl and left. And she smiled slightly. When the shoulders were dry, Master Yoon carried them out into the yard. He laid them on the table. 2 curved wings, light ash wood, dark horn, white tendons. Beautiful. Even at a glance, it was clear that this was something else. A different level. Rian assembled the crossbow. New shoulders, goat's foot, a new bowstring made from moose tendon, new bolts with square-headed tips. He drew the bowstring with the goat's leg. easy. He hung a finger-thick plank on the fence. He stepped back 100 paces.